Hello, everyone. Welcome to my webinar on stress, depression, and anxiety. My name is Anagha, and I'm excited to be your presenter for today. I hope I can give you some useful information about stress, depression, and anxiety, how they relate to each other, and their effects on your brain and the body. Just remember that this webinar is for educational purposes only and to please consult your physician before making any drastic changes to your lifestyle. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about Live Well Teens. Live Well Teens is an organization dedicated to informing teens and tweens about issues affecting their health in the form of blog posts and webinars like the one you are sitting in right now. We also have two different webinars to accommodate different learning styles. We have the formal webinar and the casual webinar. The casual webinar is the one you're sitting in right now. Just a little side note, if you have any questions, post them in the chat box on YouTube and I will try to answer them. You can also visit the Contact Us page on our website after the webinar and email me your questions. Our website is livewellteens.org. Also, this material is meant for ages 10 to 18. So if some of the content is too simple for you, it's because there may be young kids watching. Okay, let's get started. Stress. What is stress? The biological definition of stress is mental or emotional strain from adverse or demanding circumstances. Some things to know about stress are that stress affects everyone and people have different symptoms or reactions to it. There are two different types of stress. There's acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is an immediate reaction to a challenging situation. For example, when you're riding a roller coaster or taking a test. This kind of stress can cause little to no harm. Then we have chronic stress. Chronic stress is having high stress levels for long periods of time. This is the bad kind of stress, and this is the kind of stress that can cause anxiety, heart disease, depression, and high blood pressure. People at risk. So teens and young people are one of the most at-risk age groups for stress. As you can see from this diagram, teens report stress levels similar to adults, and they're exceeding the healthy levels of stress. The teens have stress levels that are increased during the school year, and stress can impact your health, and it can be detrimental to it. 34% of teens predict their stress to increase in the next year, and being stressed out as a kid or as a teenager can lead to problems like alcohol or vaping. Because teenagers have a lot to do these days. They have school, their friends, their family, extracurriculars, work, and all those other things. And this can take a toll, which is why it's super important to know how to balance that stress and make sure that you don't get stressed out because that can impact your health. But what's going on in the brain when we are stressed out? So let's look at this diagram. This diagram shows the fight or flight response. When the body is exposed to a stress stimulus, like let's say a test, then the body turns on its built-in stress response. And our brain gets flooded with stress hormones that tell the body that we are stressed now, and our heart rate increases, our breathing gets faster, and our body physically prepares for emergency. And then our brain has to choose whether we stay and fight or whether we flight and run away. Types of stress. So there's a good kind of stress and a bad kind of stress. There's eustress and distress. Eustress is positive. It can improve your performance, it energizes you, and it can pushes you out of your comfort zone. It's something a lot of people can handle. And an example of this would be moving to a new home or trying out for your school play. This is the good kind of stress, which is short term and it can be positive. Without this kind of stress, there's nothing to push us out of our comfort zone and get us to try new things. And then we have distress. Distress is the bad kind of stress. This is the negative stress that can deplete your energy. It can lead to depression and anxiety. It can decrease our overall performance, and it can even lead to physical illnesses. Risk factors. So there are a lot of things that cause stress as a kid and as in different age groups as a kid. So kids, you might not think about it, but kids can actually have stress too. We have parental stress because studies have shown that adults who are stressed out are more likely to have kids who are more stressed out. Test. So a lot of the times parents push their kids to get good grades and do well on tests. So taking a test can be a source of stress because of that pressure to do well. Fights with a friend or sibling. So, a lot of children generally don't know how to handle relationships, so it can be easy to get in fights with siblings or friends, and this can cause a lot of stress socially. Teachers. Children spend a lot of their time in elementary school with one teacher during the school year, and it can cause a lot of stress if the kid doesn't like the teacher. A new school. When you move to a new school, you have to change your teachers, you lose your friends, and you change your learning environment, which can also be a major risk factor for stress. And a new family member. If you have a new family member, this can cause less attention on the kid, it can cause competition, and it can cause jealousy. Teens. Teens also have a lot of stress, like I mentioned before. We had their school, and there's pressure to get a high GPA and get into good colleges. There is standardized testing because taking a 3-hour test can be extremely stressful, especially when that test can determine where you go to college and can determine your education. And it's such an important test. Relationships. This can also be a source of stress for teens, balancing dating with their friends, feuds, friend drama, all of that. And this can cause stress. We have extracurriculars because extracurriculars and overscheduling can make teens give 110% at multiple activities, and this can take away from time doing homework or even sleeping. So it's best not to learn how to not to overschedule because overscheduling can cause a lot of stress. Financial. So we also have sleep. There's a direct link between stress and sleep. And making sure to get enough sleep every day can help your health and reduce the risk for stress. Family. So a lot of the times, family and maintaining relationships with the family and sort of if family arguments come with the parent or the kid, that can cause stress. And friend, because for teens, socializing and seeing their peers' opinions is very important to them. So since they value these highly, all of that friend drama or having a feud with a friend, all of this can cause stress. And work. Some teens work and have financial stress, and financial stress especially can take a toll on the teen. Adults. For adults, they have a lot of stress as well. They have work stress and job stress, and making sure to manage doing well during their job, and making sure to manage that with their family life. Managing children. Managing children can be an extreme source of stress, especially when if someone has multiple children. Divorce or job loss. So, divorcing or job loss can also cause stress as an adult, financially and emotionally. Maternal stress is actually linked to harsh parenting, and studies have shown the effects of stress on adults and as also detrimental. But the effects of stress on kids is that if adults are grown up in a sensitive environment, it can lead to increased sensitivity for mental disorders. ACE score. So, an ACE score is a type of score, it's a tally of the different types of abuse and neglect in your childhood. A high ACE score means a higher risk of health problems. It can actually be used to predict mental disorders, and examples of this include abuse, violence, death, or assault. But these are not final and they're not always right. Let's look at some stats. As you can see from this stat, the higher the ACE score from a child, the more likely they are to have adult alcoholism. Now, this is only one statistic, so this is not 100%. The ACE score chart. So the ACE score chart shows that 0 to 1 would be the optimal place that has minimum risk of mental disorders. But as you go higher, the risk for mental disorders can increase. However, I just want to put it out there that a lot of the times an AC score is not something you can control. So it's very difficult to control this type of thing, and they're not final. There are so many other factors that increase the risk of stress, and I'm going to give a brief overview of some of these. We have electronics. We have FOMO, or the fear of missing out. FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is a lot of things a lot of teens use. The fear of missing out means that adults are not and teens are not able to switch off because they feel that they might miss out on an opportunity or they might miss out on a new thing with a friend or an event. The 24-hour connectivity cycle. So, especially during this era, a lot of teens and adults find it difficult to switch off. And they tend to always be watching videos or checking emails, and they have pressure to stay connected and stay available 24 hours of the day. Also, there's notifications. When you enable notifications on your phone or electronic device, when you hear a notification and when you don't see what that notification is, it can trigger an emotional response in your brain. However, for electronic devices, they can make your brain be like a goldfish and they can reduce your attention span, they can make it difficult to learn, they can cause distraction thinking, and they can cause interruption in thinking. Social media. So, social media can be a wonderful tool, but do we really know the effects of it on our brain? Social media lights up the same part of our brain as addictive substances. Social media is addictive because the dopamine-inducing environment causes an uncontrollable urge to spend hours on social media, either scrolling or texting or updating on everyone. Updates. A lot of people feel their need to give updates on their life, and this can put stress and pressure, known as technostress. Because when you see all of your friends going out to a vacation and you want to go to a vacation, this can also lead to a lot of stress, or the updates when you see everybody else posting about one particular thing, it can lead to sort of peer pressure. Comparing yourself to others. Social media is one of the best ways and most common ways that a lot of people compare themselves to others. People can look at someone else and say, oh, why aren't I like them? And this can lead to low self-esteem, and this can lead to a lot of people and developing mental health disorders. So let's look at some stats. The impact of social media on young people, as you can see, YouTube has a net positive impact on mental health. Twitter has a negative impact, and the worst are Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. And this is a study among 1,479 young people between the ages of 14 and 74. Stress and sleep. So stress and sleep are interrelated to each other. And if you get low sleep, which is less than 7 hours a day, it can cause stress. How? Well, if our brain doesn't get enough sleep, our body releases stress hormones. The chemicals connected with deep sleep tell our body to stop producing stress hormones. So when we get deep sleep, we tend to calm down. But when we don't get enough sleep, our stress hormones don't turn off and we feel stressed out throughout the day. And as you can see from this diagram, stress causes the release of stress hormones, which can lead to low quality sleep, which can lead to stress, and it's a cycle that's difficult to break out of, but it's possible. So it's important to get enough sleep a day in order to maintain your stress levels and make sure that you don't get too stressed out. Peer pressure. So peer pressure is a major cause of stress. Peer pressure is when your friends are pressuring you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. This has many warning signs, but it can be good or bad depending on the people. So peer pressure is mainly because a lot of young people and teens and kids are trying to make and keep their friends. And this can cause them to engage in risky behavior to please their friends or follow along with the crowd. This is also a cause of bullying and cyberbullying. Some warning signs of peer pressure include changing the way you talk or act, doing drugs or alcohol just because a friend is, breaking some rules with your friends because a friend is doing it, or engaging in dares or other risky behavior. Negative thinking. Negative thinking is also a major cause of stress. A lot of the times, negative thinking causes stress, depression, and anxiety because a lot of teens have self-defeating beliefs and they tend to blame themselves for a failure and not focusing on the positive. Negative thinking can lead to suicidal thoughts, low self-esteem, and labeling yourself. Health risks caused by stress. So, these are some general health risks that are caused by high levels of stress or chronic stress. We have heart disease, asthma, headaches, depression and anxiety, and Alzheimer's disease. Effects of stress in children. Some of the short-term effects of stress in children are that it can cause mood swings, which means that you're changing from happy to sad in a few minutes, acting out, and not being able to sleep. It can for kids, it can also be more tantrums or a low school performance or bad grades. The effects of stressed out children can even have trouble making friends and end up as antisocial. Some long-term effects of stress in children are that it can actually slow brain development because the brainstem overly develops and the brain relies more on primitive areas of the brain. But this can only happen when there's no adequate adult mentor to help the child and be the child's support. The effects of stress in teens. So in teens, some effects include difficulty concentrating or maybe focusing on a lecture, difficulty listening to the teacher. It can cause changes in sleeping or eating. Maybe suddenly sleeping at 12 a.m. every night, and waking up at 12 p.m. Or changes in eating. Maybe eating more, maybe eating 5 meals a day, or eating only 2 meals a day. And it can also cause more crying, maybe more crying or more slamming the door and spending more time in their rooms. It can cause anxiety and excess worrying over things that they might not be worrying about normally. Stress can cause drugs or alcohol abuse as a methods of coping, even though there are much better methods of coping that don't involve drugs or alcohol. Burnout. When teens are taking difficult AP classes and they're doing exceptionally academic, this can lead to burnout. And burnout is a major cause of stress. It can also cause panic attacks over being overworked and bad grades. When teens are stressed out, they're less likely to be able to balance out their schoolwork with their extracurriculars, and this can lead to bad grades. And maybe they have increased anger or frustration. Maybe they are being more irritable to their sibling or their parent. Effects of stress in adults. Some effects of stress in adults include poor relationships, because for adults especially, people tend to bottle up their feelings and catch each other's stress. Stress in adults is linked to poor relationships, depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, weight gain, cardiovascular disease, and stroke. Studies have shown that teens who are stressed out are more likely to be stressed out as adults, so it's important to learn how to cope with stress early. Effects of stress on your diet. Stress can also have an impact on your diet, and your diet has a major impact on your weight. Junk food. A lot of the times when people are stressed out, this can cause the fight or flight response that causes our body to eat comfort foods, such as fries or a pizza. And then this releases pleasure hormones, which can make us feel good temporarily. In the short term, the stress hormones can decrease your appetite and sort of put food on the back burner. But in the long term, stress can keep your body in its turned on state. And this can cause overeating. A lot of the times, some people tend to cope with their stress by stress eating. And that can also lead to overeating, and it's not one of the healthy coping methods. So, women are more likely to turn to stress eating to cope, while men are more likely to turn to vaping and alcohol to cope with their stress. Stress can cause high insulin levels, which means that we are using our emotion to choose foods. For example, we choose the cupcake over the broccoli. Junk or processed foods are more likely to be eaten, like I said before, and this can be harmful and lead to weight gain in the long term. Solutions. So there are certain lifestyle choices that we can make to reduce our risk of stress. Some effective solutions are avoiding caffeine because caffeine causes energy crashes and makes you feel irritable. Avoid nicotine or alcohol because these can increase the stress stimulants. Make sure to get enough physical activity because physical activity can release endorphins and metabolize excess stress hormones. Talk it out. Talking to a trusted person and talking about someone, whether it's your family, your sibling, or a counselor, can help stop stress from clouding your judgment. It can help you think things through logically and help find solutions to stress and solve problems. Sleep. Making sure to get enough sleep can help and can help you to avoid being so stressed out. And some good ways to include are to maximize relaxation before sleeping, and I'll go to bed around the same time every day. Meditation. Meditation can help you become less tense and let out steam. Meditation can cause you to become more mindful of your surroundings. It can organize all these uncluttered thoughts, and you'll feel more alert, awake, and calm. There are many stress busting foods that we can eat that cut levels of cortisol and adrenaline, which are stress hormones, in the brain. We have oranges. Oranges can curb stress hormones and stop high blood pressure. So, oranges are a stress busting food. So, too little magnesium can compound the effects of stress. So, making sure to eat foods that are high in magnesium, and spinach is one of them, can definitely help with stress. There have been studies shown that munching on raw veggies can release our clenched jaw and it can actually relieve tension. But it's important to get these important nutrients, and they can help in relieving stress. Okay, so now we're going to have a 5-minute break. I hope you guys are enjoying the webinar so far, and make sure that to be thinking of your questions for the Q&A session. I will see you in 5 minutes. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed your break and I hope you're enjoying the webinar so far. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about depression. Depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, and it can cause significant impairment in our daily life. Depression affects the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you act. Depression is caused by a lack of serotonin, and depression is treatable. Depression can cause feelings of sadness and loss of interest in activities. Depression is a major risk factor for a variety of emotional and physical problems. Some symptoms of depression include abnormal behaviors, just anything that your teen or you would normally do, making decisions and having trouble making decisions or trouble remembering details, sleeping too much or sleeping too little, and early morning wakefulness, hopelessness, appetite loss, suicidal thoughts, cramps, and lack of interest in activities that you or your teen would normally be interested in. Depression can affect specific areas of the brain. Depression can affect the amygdala, the thalamus, and the hippocampus. The purpose of the amygdala is to control our emotions and our emotional response to danger. This part is usually responsible for fear or anger, and its impact as a result of depression is that the amygdala has a higher activity, which can lead to reckless or negative decisions. They can also lead to poor judgment and more risky behaviors. Next, we have the thalamus. The thalamus controls sensory responses and sends appropriate information to the part of our brain. So when as a result of depression, we have less control over our mood, we tend to have more sudden mood swings, and we could feel happy or sad for no reason at all. And less control over our mood can actually lead to bipolar disorder. Next, we have the hippocampus. The hippocampus processes long-term memory and in recollection. The hippocampus is an important part of making sure that we learn and remember things and store things in our long-term memory. So as a result of depression, we can have a smaller hippocampus and impaired nerve cell growth. We can have reduced memory because it can actually shrink the brain's memory. These are all long-term effects. Antidepressants. Antidepressants are drugs that can correct chemical imbalances in the brain, and they're believed to be responsible for changes in our mood or behavior. They are usually medications that are said to relieve depression. There are many different types of antidepressants. Antidepressants are a popular treatment, and there are many side effects of antidepressants, and some of them can be harmful. Some side effects of antidepressants include nausea, because the antidepressant can have an impact on the central nervous system, which can lead to nausea. Increased appetite, because when people who have depression, when the depression eases up, they tend to have a better appetite. Insomnia, because serotonin can play a direct role in REM sleep imitation. Suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can lead to suicidal thoughts and increased risk for suicide and sadness. Fatigue. Sleep problems can cause fatigue during the day, and antidepressants have been known to cause sleep problems, such as insomnia. Avoiding depression. So, some good ways to avoid depression are to build a strong support network, because having good friends who you can trust can really make a difference in our mental health. Reducing the level of stress that you have. Reducing the amount of stress you have by meditation or breathing techniques can have an impact on our physical, mental, and social well-being, and it can reduce stress, which is really important. Plant-based diet. So having a diet consisting of primarily plant-based diet can avoid depression, according to some experts. Avoiding negative thoughts. Avoiding negative thoughts and positive thinking can play a role in avoiding depression and preventing it. Time management. So, time management is something not very many people think of, but time management and knowing when to balance your work time with your leisure time can be really important in your mental health and making sure that you don't have burnout. Maybe make sure to take a break in between your studying, or make sure to do something and make sure to have some leisure time rather than just work or school. Anxiety. Now we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety. Anxiety is a normal and healthy emotion. Anxiety is worrying about everyday things, and too much anxiety is a bad thing. Anxiety disorders are not temporary, but anxiety disorders are treatable. Anxiety can affect your personal life, and anxiety is not your fault. Some symptoms of anxiety include excessive worrying, and it's only a problem when this worrying begins to make it difficult for you to concentrate or achieve your daily tasks. An agitated or racing pulse, and fast breathing. Any feelings of persuasive worry or subtle emotional changes, maybe when you're worrying for no reason at all, or when you're worrying about one particular thing, even though you know that that's no cause of harm, and psychosomatic complaints, especially ones that mimic normal teen complaints. Is it normal? So, experiencing occasional anxiety is normal. Everyone can experience some sort of anxiety, but only begins to be a problem when it begins to impair our daily function or when it causes restlessness, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, trouble sleeping, and difficulty controlling our worry. And these can be a problem, and this is when you see your medical doctor. Anxiety in the brain. So, anxiety in the brain, you can switch. But let's take, for example, the potential cause of anxiety. And let's say that's a test. There are two ways to go about this. You could do the cognitive response, which is where you get out your notes, you stay collected, you make sure to study a few days before the test rather than cramming, and you make sure to use effective study techniques, take breaks when you're studying, and when you get to the day of the test, you stay calm, prepared, and ready to show your knowledge. That's the cognitive response. And this doesn't lead to any anxiety. The problem is when we take the emotional response, which, like, you can switch between responses. And so what happens is when we have the emotional response, which is where we begin to worry, we begin to worry about, oh, what's going to happen when we fail the test. And the amygdala is based on fear and anger. It detects this little small worrying, and either the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex or the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, they both can amplify it. They detect the small amount of worrying and amplify it, so you begin to worry more and more and more about this test, and this can lead to anxiety. So you can become worried about the test. And then this anxiety is, if it affects your, if this kind of anxiety is sort of what happens in the brain. So the cognitive response is the best way, but it's anxiety disorders. So there are many types of anxiety disorders, and I could do an entire webinar just on anxiety disorders, but I'm just going to go into a brief overview of some of them. So some anxiety, let's see OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. The OCD is an anxiety disorder where we feel uncontrollable thoughts that are unwanted, and they're repeating in your brain. They're obsessive thoughts, and we feel a compulsion to do certain things. We feel these compulsive rituals can become time-consuming and demanding. These can lead to anxiety, and you can tend to feel overwhelmed. Society often makes fun of OCD and people who are doing this. So this is the vicious cycle of OCD. We have an obsessive thought. Let's say, for example, that there are germs on your hands. And then we feel anxiety over, oh, the germs are going to make us sick. And then when we feel sick, we're going to have to go to the hospital. And then we tend to feel so much anxiety over, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I get sick? I'm going to die. No, And then we feel like compulsive behavior, such as washing our hands. And when we wash our hands, we feel temporary relief over, let's say, I've gotten rid of all the germs in my hands. And then the obsessive thought comes back. And as you can see, this cycle can become time consuming because constantly washing your hands or whatever compulsive behavior that you do can be extremely time consuming and it can lead to a lot of anxiety. Next, we have PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is triggered by a terrible event that happened that has been so terrible that it's been embedded in your long-term memory. It's mainly among veterans and people who fought in the war. It usually has a certain trigger, and this particular trigger can cause people to remember that event again and they can have severe anxiety over this particular event, such as maybe a death or a war. And medications can treat this type of anxiety, but there really is no cure for PTSD. We have flashbacks over that particular thing. Maybe it appears in our dreams, maybe when we're triggered to a thing. Let's say, for example, there's a veteran who has had a terrible event. This person would have flashbacks about this, and it would be extremely traumatic. He would be always have a trigger, and he would face extreme anxiety when that particular trigger was seen. Next, we have panic attacks. Panic attacks are extremely common. They are caused by intense periods of anxiety or fear. They can cause unrealistic worrying about things that may not be a cause for worry. Some symptoms of a panic attack can include sweating, dizziness, palpitations, and shortness of breath. However, these are more intense than normal symptoms of anxiety. In fact, panic attacks are extremely common in celebrities and children, especially child celebrities, when they're overworked and when they're working long hours. And a lot of the times, some people who've had a panic attack before have anxiety over having a panic attack because panic attacks are not fun. Social anxiety. Social anxiety is a fear of social situations. It's very prevalent in teenagers. It's caused by the fear of being judged and evaluated by other people. It can only happen when we're in certain social situations. We have irrational fears and persistent anxiety. And this is different from introvertedness. This is, for example, you don't like being around people because being around people makes you stressed out and makes you worried. So these kinds of people are less likely to go to school events. But this is not a bad thing. Anxiety medications. So there are also many different types of anxiety medications that you can take for anxiety. Some side effects of anxiety medications include blurred vision, upset stomach, confusion, headaches, dizziness, and insomnia. These are some long-term and short-term side effects. There are also many other side effects of anxiety medications, such as weight loss, nausea, drowsiness, and weight gain or weight loss. Stress and anxiety. Stress and anxiety have a relationship with each other. Stress can be a trigger of anxiety, and stress can amplify anxiety. So, first, there's a trigger of anxiety. Then we face symptoms of anxiety, such as nausea or dizziness or fast breathing. Then we have physical or emotional avoidance or suppression. And then we feel short-term relief until the trigger of anxiety comes again. And anxiety is a cycle, and stress only amplifies this cycle. Stress versus depression versus anxiety. So stress is a response to danger. It can be caused by peer pressure, family problems, etc. Women are more likely to have stress than men. And then we have depression, which is a response to a harmful or traumatic event, or just feelings of persistent sadness. This can be caused by harmful events, low self-esteem, or false beliefs about yourself, and women are more likely to be depressed than men. And then there's anxiety, which is a response to uncertainty. It can be caused by harmful events, low self-esteem, and peer pressure. Or it can be caused by a variety of triggers, and these are just some of them. And women are more likely to feel anxious than men. So as you can see, women are more likely to be stressed out, to feel depressed, and to feel anxious, except for OCD. For OCD, men are more at risk for OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder than women. Solutions. There are a variety of ways that you can reduce your stress levels. First, the basics. Let's review. We have exercise, making sure to get enough exercise a day, quitting smoking and drinking, avoiding caffeinated products, a plant-based diet, and an effective sleep schedule. But there are also some other things. We have yoga. Yoga, there have been studies proven that yoga is beneficial because it can modulate the stress response and decrease our physiological responses to stress. Yoga is a better way to manage symptoms. It's a calming nature, and yoga can relieve muscle tension, which can cause stress because it's calming and it's in calming nature. So next, we have anti-inflammatory diet. So there are anti-inflammation foods that can have. These foods are high in natural antioxidants, and they're good for the gut. Anti-inflammatory foods are foods like nuts, berries, or tomatoes. And some things to avoid are red meat, soda, fries, refined carbs, and margarine. Because this is why. Because an anti-inflammatory diet is good for the gut, and our gut can synthesize serotonin. This can help reduce stress, decrease anxiety, and avoid depression. Next, we have probiotics. Probiotics are extremely beneficial for depression because there's this thing called the gut-brain axis, or GBA. This links the central nervous system to the gut. There are microorganisms in our gut, that can play a crucial role in reducing inflammation and producing neurotransmitters. The probiotics can reduce some symptoms. Some examples of probiotic foods include yogurt, but they're not limited to yogurt and tofu. And probiotic foods can help with depression and anxiety. Next, we have exercise. I know I've mentioned this, but the reason why exercise is so good for stress is because intense exercise can release the body's endorphins, and low intensity exercise over time can trigger the release of certain proteins, which can improve brain functioning and make you feel better. Next, we have meditation and breathing techniques. So meditation can reduce stress and cure anxiety because meditation can stimulate certain parts of the brain. It can allow the brain to get maximum cerebrospinal fluid, and we tend to become more aware of our negative thoughts and stressful feelings. Magnesium. Like I said before, magnesium is an important mineral. It can increase GABA, which encourages relaxation. It can play a key role in regulating the stress response, and magnesium deficiency is actually linked to higher stress and anxiety. Okay, so we also have vitamin D. Vitamin D is also a major part of making sure that we have enough, and making sure to eat foods high in vitamin D, such as carrots, are important. Okay, so now I hope you guys enjoyed the webinar. And if you have any questions, I'm going to wait for 2 minutes. If you guys have any questions at all, just make sure to post in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if you guys don't want to, you can go to the Contact Us page on livewellteens.org and email me your questions. Okay. Looks like there are no questions. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar and have a good day. I'll see you next week.